good morning, everybody. And the objective today is to share a little bit of trends that we observe in the pharma industry and a bit of learning, right? I think also based on the discussion that we just heard this morning, I think in this type of events, learning from other companies is probably the most useful things that you can hear, because we all have different challenges, just the way that we try to address those, right? So what I wanted to start with is a couple of trends. There are many trends that we are witnessing within the pharma industry, but there are a couple to me that are important for today's discussion. So one is the transition to specialty medicine. As you know, and most of you know, specialty medicine is a complex medicine, autoimmune, cancer, genetic disease, and so on. But what is important is a transition, right? If you look at globally now, there are over 40% of global pharma revenue coming from specialty indications. And the other things which are very transformational is part of the innovation topic we just discussed earlier, right? So over the last decade and more, many of the scientific and technology breakthrough led to the discovery of many different niche and target therapies. And if you look at globally now, we almost see the double of compounds in development versus 10 years ago. And what is important is the origin of that innovation that is changing, right? So if you look at the majority of innovation now is actually driven by biotech companies. So biotech companies are small companies that have maybe not sales today, or they have one lead candidate, and then very many early stage assets, but nothing really marketed. And you see a lot of more innovation coming from those companies, because those companies oftentimes they target small patient populations, and they can do so and run clinical trials, because obviously the cost of clinical trials is lower, because they don't need to run clinical trial like in cardiovascular, where you need thousands and thousands of people, right? But what is really mind-blowing, if you look at the slide on the right, you can see that in 2022, biotech company alone have more assets than the whole pharmaceutical industry back in 2012. So that are really truly mind-blowing. And what we wanted to say today a little bit more is how the face of innovation is changing and what we are witnessing, right? One is the source of innovation changes. It's not just about biotech versus multinational, but where this innovation is coming from. And you can see that nowadays, China and also India, they're coming as a growing force in terms of origin of innovation. And you can see that now China has eclipsed Japan and Korea in terms of new assets under development, right? And this is not because China and Korea, they are slow. It's just because China has been growing much faster. The other things that we notice is the rising dependence of biotech as well. So many years ago, many biotech would just sold their innovation, but more and more, some of those companies are focusing on selecting markets like maybe US and a few European countries, and try to commercialize the innovation themselves. And lastly, the TA focus, right? I think probably nothing completely new to you. The big TAs are CNS, immunology, oncology. It's still the same, and also we expect that to continue going forward. What I wanted to share with you is, what are the opportunities? I think the audience today is a mid-sized company, is about company in emerging market in Europe. So we wanted to share, what do we see opportunity for companies as yourself? So one is, we saw innovation shifting to Asia. So what it means is probably, while you look at your research, also start to look more selectively towards Asia as well. There might be opportunities there. I think what we observe in Asia is a stepwise type of change, right? So back in the days, used to be generics, like in the case of Glenmark, right? Another Indian company is imitation, right? And then we're moving towards innovation. And within that innovation also, we see different steps, right? So for example, many of those Chinese companies, we see the big chunk of innovation is what I call Me Too / safe innovation, which is basically more targeting validated MOAs, so mechanisms of actions, while maybe a smaller fraction about proper breakthrough innovation, so novel MOA, right? And this is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because what it means for maybe some emerging market company or less regulated markets is that if you get an innovation that comes late within an existing MOA, maybe the price is also a bit lower, right? So versus the gold standard. So maybe for price-sensitive market, that could be an opportunity as well. The other things that we realize is also very important is the regulatory due diligence, right? Obviously, it's clear that it's important, but what we notice is some of the Chinese company or Indian company or Korean company, they might develop, they might run clinical trial studies. Maybe sometimes they don't cover the big countries. Sometimes they have the patient population that is not representative of other global clinical trials. And you really need to want to vet in those things early on because you don't want that you run your business case and you progress quite a bit, and then you realize, oh, maybe you need a bridging study, it might take more years, and then you waste everyone's time. So, early on, involve someone from regulatory and try to sort it out. The other thing is on the rising independence of biotech, right? So what we noticed that when you look at the pure innovation, really few markets count in the world, like US, Germany, and Japan, right? So some of those biotech, because of maybe the HQ is also based in Western market, they don't want to set up shops everywhere in the world, right? So that really opens up opportunity for companies that are playing in secondary market or emerging market like ACINO, for example. And we found those discussions very, very engaging, right? It depends on also where that innovation is coming from. If the founder is still there, for example, he or she might have a willingness to see his innovation or her innovation be available across the world. It just might not have the means to make it available. And lastly, on the onco space, I mean, there is a lot of companies which are targeting the onco space. I think it's very active and attractive, but also it's a very dynamic market and it's very competitive, right? With a lot of big guys being entrenched. So a word of caution about, what are the real capabilities that you have in the space. And also, if you're planning to move that direction, the recommendation that we try to give to our own teams is start to build capability early on, right? Because that would be important when you launch your drugs down the line. The other things that I wanted to discuss is some of the trend that we're observing on the deal making, right? So we've been discussing about the deal making before, especially in emerging market, right? But what we're observing in 2023. So what we notice is that the absolute value of licensing deal in M&A in 2023 has increased versus 2022. But it didn't increase in terms of volume. Why did it increase value, not volume, is because we think that there has been a little bit more prudent approach from multinational and other companies, and they basically de-risk their licensing M&A strategy. So they've been focusing more on late-stage assets and commercialized assets. The other things that we've been observing in 2023 was a challenging funding environment, and we think this is not going to change, right? So interests are high, and they're going to be higher for longer, right? So we've now seen, I think, the Fed's expectation to increase rates in March dropping from 40% to 20% now. So yeah, I think interest rates will not change in the very short term. So we expect that to be challenging in terms of funding. We also noticed, and maybe many of you noticed, over the last couple of years, if you look at the number of IPO within the biotech space, they are down, right? They are down of a huge lot versus the previous 5 years. What we see is that the venture capitalist money is still there and is still available, but oftentimes we notice that is mostly reserved to the existing portfolio company, and they are less actively looking for new sponsor. They might, but less than before. The other things, obviously, is the failure of SVB, so the Silicon Valley Bank, which was lending quite a bit of money to biotech. That was a little bit of a shock for some companies. And then the other things which is hanging in the industry is the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act, right? So the thing is, many companies, they don't know the extent of that act and potentially how it's going to be expanded in the future. So the Inflation Reduction Act is targeting now basic discount on the top 10 drugs in the US, but just you don't know how deep they might go in the future. In terms of 2024, what do we expect? So in general, when we discuss with the team is we expect more or less the same, but maybe with some tweaks. So what are those tweaks? I think you can split it between early stage company and maybe late stage company. So the early stage company within innovation, what we see is that they will probably seek partnership. and why they will seek more partnership than before. One is they want to get more money to extend the cash runaways, maybe especially before IPOs, or maybe to extend the planned IPO timelines. And then also there is another important thing, which is signaling to the rest of the industry and some other players the value for your asset as well. So someone did the DD, someone liked your asset, so that's also a signal that you send to the market as well. And then the other things that we see is late-stage company. We expect maybe a little bit of pickup in out-licensing activities, especially those biotechs that don't have presence in maybe emerging market or secondary market. Why? Again, to increase the cash runaways, right? Important, and also, to generate, demand, right? Or potentially signal interest and demand in the eyes of other investors. And we see some of those companies also looking for capital, right? So ACINO, maybe for some of you that are not familiar with, as you mentioned, is an emerging market platform. We are now owned today by ADQ. So ADQ is a sovereign wealth fund in Abu Dhabi. So as you mentioned, the rise of sovereign wealth fund before. And there are so many companies that are knocking every day and asking for capital, right? And they are trying to seek that capital privately compared to the past. So talking about the partnership, talking about the hard work that goes beyond the curtains. This is an example of the last 10 years at ACINO. We signed a huge number of partnerships, and similar to Menarini, 80% of what we sell or more is coming from partnership agreements, right? So we need to be the best partner of choice for those companies. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we probably signed 4 M&A, 70, 80 licensing deals, which is lower than other mid-sized company or bigger company, but for our size, which are $700 million, it's a lot of effort, right? And partnership are very important, right? And find the right partner, as Marco mentioned, and working together. I think that's really important. And the beauty about partnership is, if you do sign that partnership and you deliver on the partnership, then the partner doesn't really have a big willingness to change, right? So you need to do the heavy lifting early, then you need to deliver, and then you can reap the benefits down the line. Good. So the last things I wanted to conclude was a little bit of personal learning on when we work on acquiring the marketed assets and when we work on in-license late-stage assets, especially phase 3, pre-registration and registered assets. Those learning are more around the search and evaluation, because most of the audience I understand is around the BD field, so probably more relevant to you. So when it comes to marketed asset, you need to have close relationship with a number of stakeholders, right? What we call it, you need to be visible in the eyes of banks, right? So banks need to know that you're open to buy stuff, so they send you all the teaser. Sometimes you get a lot of junks, but you need to get also that junk and filter through. You need to be visible in the eyes of advisor, because oftentimes advisor might develop a vendor due diligence, so they might give you an heads up early on that an asset, not specifically what, because it's a CDA, right? But tell you something might pop up, in Asia or elsewhere. And then also close to some of your competitors / target that might exist in the market, right? Because those are the best deal you can make, right? Because when you look at competitive target or assets, it's going to be expensive, right? So as we discussed earlier, there are no discounts. The multiples are just going up. So if you can have kind of a one-to-one type of engagement, the process might be longer, but you might pay a lower price, right? So it's worth it to develop that network. Then another funding or learning that we have is, because of valuation are up and they're quite expensive, you need to give in some of your synergies to match the seller expectation, right? Obviously, if you have the money and you're willing to pay. Because we realize that unless something very strategic, but if you don't have some synergies, then it's going to really be difficult to match seller expectation, and it's going to be very difficult to convince your CEO to pay for it as well. And then the other thing is about, and we discussed earlier about tech transfer and all the rest, right? What they want to do, the big multinational like Roche, Sanofi, and all the rest, they want to divest the brand is get the money, get out ASAP, right? And sometimes they want to give you 2 years tech transfer. it just doesn't work, it's too short, right? So sometimes people might think, I really need to sign this deal. Yes, you need, right? But you need to negotiate early on, at least a 4 to 5 year tech transfer, right? Hopefully you need less, but you need to. Because I know other companies, we did acquire some brand from Takeda, and I think we had a 4 or 5 years tech transfer, and it's working fine. Other companies, they sign a deal for less than that, and they're in trouble now, because you pay a lot of money, but then you're out of stock in the market. So that is very important to materialize that deal that you just made. And then in terms of late-stage assets alignment, I mean, this seems quite obvious, right, to many of you, right? But C-level alignment, CEO and CFO alignment is important. Why is it important? Because they need to know what you're doing, but also you want to get a rough sense when you work with some of those biotech, which might require front payment, how much your CEO and CFO are willing to pay, more or less to get a range, right? Because you don't want to do the whole work and then realize, oh, that's too much for my palate, right? And also, obviously, the other things you need to understand the delegation of authority that your CEO has, right? Because if his given deal size is above, a licensing deal size is above your CEO delegation of authority, then you need to go to the board. And if you need to go to the board, it always takes longer than you plan. And the partner might not always be happy, right? Then it's very important, again, simple to say, but important in practice, is know what you want. So when we talk about innovation, there are 50 new drugs that are approved by the FDA every year. If you look at the global pipeline, there are probably 1,000 projects and clinical trials in phase 3, right? So it's a huge space. You cannot boil the ocean. You need to be focused. You need to know what you want, right? And another important point is when you find something, right, how do you convince the biotech company to work with you, right? And that could be sometimes simple, but sometimes a very long process as well. So if you think about biotech with one lead asset, sometimes the founder is still there. He might or she might have worked on that asset for the last 15 years, right? It's his baby or her baby, right? So you need to be patient and working and try to convince that person that you're going to take care of that asset as he would or she would, right? And lastly, what is important is the showcase your capabilities, right? I think there are different BD technique, right? You can be more open versus more close on what you disclose, but definitely be evidence-driven and show where you are, what you're strong at. Transparent on the business cases. You cannot give out everything, but be transparent on where you can add value. Oftentimes, the out-licensor, they underestimate how much it costs to build that drugs and to launch that drug in the market. And sorry, 1 minute to go. The last point, I think, is very important. What we joke in our team is it a margin of upfront? You cannot get both, right? And in ACINO, we've been growing over the last decade with a number of distribution deals that are good ROIC, so return on investment capital, but low margin, right? And now we're shifting a little bit more towards giving more upfront, but then getting a higher margin. But you cannot get both, right? And I think you need to be clear on your strategy, what you want to achieve. You get your alignment, and then you look for that assets, right? And with that, I close. So it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. I'm speaking with some of you later on. Thank you.